Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Investing Talk podcast. Today we're going to take a look at Riot Platforms. They're making quite a splash in the Bitcoin mining scene, but their stock price has been all over the place lately.
Oh, it's a really interesting case. They're doing really well operationally, but then their stock price is kind of telling a different story.
Yeah, so let's try to figure that out. We've got analyst reports, we've got market trends,
Yeah.
and even some stuff from social media that we'll be looking at. But let's start with the good stuff. Riot Platforms had a huge year in 2024. They saw a 34% jump in revenue, and they went from a loss to over $100 million in net income.
And it's not just a fluke either. They've been really ramping up their Bitcoin production. In February of 2025, they mined 12% more Bitcoin than the previous year, which is pretty impressive when you consider the Bitcoin halving event back in 2024. That made mining a lot harder.
And get this, analyst price targets are saying that Riot Platforms, ticker symbol RIOT, they're saying it's way undervalued right now. The average price target is $17.67, but it's currently trading at $8.88.
So that begs the question, why is the stock price so much lower than what the analysts are saying? That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, well, the recent drops in price definitely stand out. RIOT is down 5.08% in the last day, 11.24% over the past week, and a big 31.53% compared to last year.
We do have to think about the bigger picture, though. Crypto stocks tend to be pretty volatile, and RIOT specifically has a beta of 4.23. That basically means that its price swings are way more dramatic than the overall market. And on top of that, Riot Platforms actually scaled back their expansion plans, so they've lowered their projected hash rate capacity, which is like their processing power for mining Bitcoin.
So they're being a bit more cautious. Is that a bad sign or just a smart move in a market that's been so up and down?
Hmm. That's the question a lot of investors are asking. Are they just reacting to the market, or are they worried about Bitcoin mining in the long run? It's something we really need to dig into.
And now to make things even more complicated, we've got activist investors getting involved.
Oh, things are about to get interesting. Activist investors, they're known for shaking things up. They buy a lot of stock in a company and then try to force changes, sometimes really big changes.
And Riot Platforms has caught the eye of not one, but two big activist investors, Starboard Value and D.E. Shaw.
And what I find really interesting is what they're pushing for. They want Riot Platforms to branch out, to move away from Bitcoin mining and get into artificial intelligence and high-performance computing, or HPC.
And here's the crazy part. Riot Platforms is actually considering it. They've even paused some of their Bitcoin expansion plans to look into this stuff. So are they going to go all in on AI? Is that the right move? We don't know yet.
It's a really bold move, that's for sure. It could be great or it could be a disaster. It just adds another layer of complexity for investors trying to figure out what Riot Platform's going to do next.
So we've got this mix of things. They're making money, they're mining more Bitcoin, but then there are these big questions about where the company is headed and how outside factors like the price of Bitcoin and the whole crypto market are going to affect them.
You hit the nail on the head, and that's why we're doing this deep dive. We want to connect the dots for our listeners so they can make good decisions about investing in our IoT. I've got to zoom in a bit here. The price of Bitcoin is super important for Riot Platforms. I mean, they're mining it right. Right now, it's bouncing between $90,000 and $96,000. Some folks are saying it could hit $100,000 or even $200,000 in 2025. If Bitcoin takes off, Riot Platforms could make a ton of money, but if it tanks,
Yeah, that could be a rough ride.
exactly. That's the risk with any investment that's tied to one thing, especially something as volatile as Bitcoin.
And while the analysts are saying RIOT might be undervalued, the technical analysis is giving us mixed signals.
Well, there are some signs that it might go up in the short term, but the long-term trend is looking a little bearish.
And we can't forget those sell ratings from the technical analysis, which doesn't really fit with the idea that RIOT might be a good deal at its current price. It's kind of confusing.
This is where you got to use your own judgment. You have to look at all the evidence, the fundamentals, the market trends, and figure out how much risk you're comfortable with. That's how you make the best investment decisions.
Okay, so before we move on, let's recap. Riot Platforms is at a crossroads. Their finances are solid, they're making a profit, they're mining more Bitcoin, but they're also dealing with pressure from the market, and they might be changing their whole strategy. It's high risk, high reward.
That's what makes it so interesting. It's not an easy buy or sell decision. There's a lot to think about.
And that brings us to the big question for our listeners. If you were an investor, What would you do with RIOT right now? Would you hold? Would you buy? Would you sell?
We've given you the info. Now it's your turn to put it to use. Think about your investment goals, your risk tolerance, your overall strategy. Where does RIOT fit in?
We always love hearing from you guys, so leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating situation. They've got this great foundation, and if Bitcoin keeps going up, they could really take off.
But there's also this uncertainty about what they're going to do next. And the crypto market is so unpredictable. It's a tough decision for investors.
Let's dig a little deeper into these activist investors. It's not every day that you see a company basically embrace such a huge change in strategy.
You're right. It's almost like they're saying, hey, we're a Bitcoin mining company, but maybe we're also an AI and high-performance computing company. It's a pretty bold move.
And it kind of shows what's happening in the tech world in general. All these different technologies and industries are starting to blend together. It's not about just focusing on one thing anymore. It's about finding connections and adapting to change.
So Riot Platforms is like a little example of what's happening in the whole tech sector. They're trying to find their place in this new world where everything is changing so fast.
Yeah, exactly. This move into AI and HPC could be their way of protecting themselves, spreading out their income, and not relying so much on Bitcoin, which can be so unpredictable.
But it's a big risk. They're going into a whole new area where there are already some really big players. It's like David versus Goliath.
That's what makes it so interesting to watch. Will they pull it off? Or will they try to do too much and lose focus on what they're good at?
It's like a real-life business case study unfolding right in front of us.
And for investors, it's a test of how much risk they're willing to take. Do they think Riot Platforms can actually transform themselves? Or are they looking for something more stable and predictable?
There's no right answer. It all depends on the individual investor and their goals.
So let's switch gears for a minute and talk about the technical analysis. It's giving us some clues about what might happen with Riot Platforms in the short term and the long term.
We're seeing those sell ratings in the short term, which means the stock price might keep dropping for a bit.
But there are some signs that things might turn around soon, especially with the RSI, or Relative Strength Index, around 35 to 40. That means the stock might be getting oversold.
So we could see the price jump back up, especially if Bitcoin starts to rally.
It's definitely possible. But we have to remember that technical analysis is just one piece of the puzzle. It's not a magic crystal ball.
It's more like a compass.
Okay.
It can point you in the right direction, but it doesn't guarantee you'll get where you want to go.
You still need to think about everything else we've talked about. The company's performance, the activist investors, and what's happening in the market as a whole.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. I can understand why some investors might feel a little overwhelmed.
It's okay to feel that way, but you don't want to get stuck in analysis paralysis. Sometimes you just got to trust your gut and make a decision.
But it's always a good idea to do your research and maybe even talk to a financial advisor before you make any big investment decisions.
Absolutely. Making informed decisions is so important, especially in a market like crypto, which is so crazy and unpredictable.
All right, so we've covered a lot today. We talked about how Riot Platforms is doing financially, how much Bitcoin they're mining, their move into AI and HPC, the activist investors, the technical analysis, and the overall market.
We've given you a pretty good overview, and I hope our listeners are feeling more confident about understanding Riot Platforms and all the things that are affecting our stock price.
I think the main takeaway is that Riot Platforms is a company that's changing. They've got some great things going for them, but they're also facing some big challenges, and we don't really know what's going to happen next.
And that's what makes them so exciting to follow. There's a lot at stake, and it's anyone's guess how it's all going to play out.
The only thing we can say for sure is that it's going to be a wild ride.
You got that right. And as always, we encourage our listeners to stay engaged and keep learning. The investment world is constantly changing, and there's always something new to discover.
Speaking of wild rides, we can't forget that Riot Platforms is in the crypto world, and that's known for being super volatile.
Oh yeah, crypto can be really unpredictable. It's like riding a roller coaster with your eyes closed.
But that volatility can also be a good thing. For investors who are okay with a little more risk, Riot Platforms could be a big winner if they play their cards right.
There's definitely that potential. But if Bitcoin crashes, Riot Platforms could be in trouble no matter how well they're doing in other areas.
That's why it's so important to have a diverse portfolio. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, especially when it comes to crypto.
I totally agree. Spreading your investments across different types of assets is investing 101. Whether you're into crypto stocks, bonds, real estate, it's always a good idea.
By the way, have you been keeping up with what's happening with AI? It seems like every company is trying to get in on that action.
It's a big deal right now, and there's a reason for that. AI could completely change so many industries. It's a real game changer.
And Riot Platforms moving into AI could be a sign of things to come. Maybe we'll see more Bitcoin mining companies branching out into other tech areas.
That could definitely happen. It would make sense because they already know a lot about high-performance computing, which is something you need for both Bitcoin mining and AI.
This whole thing with Riot Platforms really shows how connected the tech world is. What happens in one area can affect the whole industry.
That's why it's so important to stay informed and keep learning. The more you understand the bigger picture, the better decisions you can make about investing.
So to wrap things up, what are the big takeaways for our listeners today?
Well, we know that Riot Platforms is at a turning point. They have a solid base, but there are also some big question marks, both for the company itself and for the market in general.
It's high risk, high reward. Investors need to think carefully about the potential benefits and the potential downsides before they make any moves.
If you're looking for a safe investment that you know will do well, Riot Platforms probably isn't for you. But if you're comfortable with some risk and you think Bitcoin and AI have a bright future, Riot Platforms could be a really good opportunity.
Like we always say, do your research, talk to a financial advisor if you need to, and make smart decisions that fit your own situation and your investment goals.
That's the best advice anyone can give you. Make sure your investments match your overall financial plan.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into Riot Platforms. We hope you found this helpful.
Remember, the investment world is always changing. Staying informed is the key to success.
Be sure to subscribe to the Investing Talk podcast for more deep dives into the companies and trends that are shaping the market. We really appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time.
Until then, happy investing.
And if you like this episode, please share it with your friends and leave us a comment. We love hearing from you.